What's up, Eagles Nation? This is Steve Hyder, Gate City Sports Channel, and today I want to talk a little bit about money, investments that we have made, or the lack of investments we have made on the defensive side of the ball, and how the salary cap kind of impacts all this information. Because there's a lot of chit chat going back and forth with the recent strain we've had on our secondary, and some valid points being brought up, like maybe we've really been undervaluing the cornerback position and the secondary in general, and this has led to this crisis we're currently in. And I just wanted to really hash out like this Eagles defense as we've really known it since the late '90s heading inwards and what's happened because there's been a weird ebb and flow when it comes to the secondary. I mean, we've had great secondaries throughout the years, and we've had some wow, what the hell happened secondaries. And I think we're currently in a what the hell happened secondary situation. So let's jump into the topic.
1-4. Keenum stands in, firing McLaurin.
Okay, before we dive into this topic, let's talk about the cornerstones of the Eagles defense. So, the players that you can clearly look at and see the intention of the Eagles to build their defense around. And for the Eagles, it really started with the inside, the trenches outward. So, when we really look at the way this Eagles defense is laid out, I mean, the star player here is Fletcher Cox. He's got the largest contract of any defender on the defensive side of the ball. He's really where the conversation is going to start and end when it comes to the success of the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Outside of Fletcher Cox, you have this other concerted effort on the defensive line. You have Brandon Graham, who's really not on as big a contract as people think, but nonetheless, he's still one of the higher paid players on defense. Derek Barnett, who, while he's not on a big contract, he's on a rookie contract. He's a high draft pick, so there was some draft capital spent to get him here. Malik Jackson, who was a big free agent signing, he's one of the higher paid defenders we have on the football team. So there's your defensive lineman right there. And then for me, it kind of then goes out to one linebacker that we have made a bit of an investment in, and that's Nigel Bradham. So it always looks like to me the Eagles want to keep 1 to 2 competent, not higher end linebackers. It's just the way that we're built. And then we seem to really put a lot of investment in the secondary from the safety perspective. Malcolm Jenkins would be that next guy I would say is like the cornerstone. So cornerstone, Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson, Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, Nigel Bradham, Malcolm Jenkins. I would call the cornerstone of this Philadelphia Eagles defense. And then I think we have some complementary pieces. And that would be like the signing of Tim Jernigan for that third defensive tackle rotation, right? Kamu Grugier-Hill at the linebacker spot. Zach Brown at the linebacker spot. Then you get Ronald Darby being brought back, right? We gave Ronald Darby that $2 million whatever contract to come back because our secondary was so young, and there was just a lot of unknown in the secondary, and that's a Darby coming back from a major ACL injury. So clearly, there was intention there to be a complementary piece. And then Rodney McLeod, the other safety position. We are running the basis of our defense through something that's a big nickel. My perspective, and you may have a different perspective, but my perspective is an idealized world. Okay, we would love to run a big nickel to where we don't need to implement, you know, concern or worry about having a third linebacker on the field, so we don't have to worry about being in big nickel, being in nickel, period, because we do have the safeties there. So with that said, we don't put a lot of investment in the linebacker position. It's also why I was a little shocked we carried 6 linebackers because as often as we're in the big nickel, it just seems unnecessary to have 6 linebackers. With that said, I will admit I'm a little shocked that because we run the big nickel that we haven't made a larger investment at the cornerback position because you're going to be basically putting 5 defensive backs on the field. Now, because we're in big nickel, I think we like to carry 3 safeties in a mix with an occasional third corner. So we would like to play off those depending if we're trying to defend the run, defend the pass, like how we want to do that. So with that said, it does shock me that we haven't really signed a higher tier cornerback right now. We seem to really have thought like we had something in Sidney Jones, like we tried to play that draft piece, and it hasn't worked out. So I really want to jump into the origins of our secondary play in this terrible position we're in right now. Okay, the origin story of all this to me really begins prior to Andy Reid in 1996 underneath the Ray Rhodes coach team. And it really starts with a very, very great secondary that is going to be inherited to an extent by Andy Reid. What I really want to talk about is that late 90s, early 2000 team. That's the first time I can really remember outside of like the early 90s having this, monstrous secondary. I mean, it's prior to the Buddy Ryan days in the secondary there. So what I really remember was that early secondary of having Robert Taylor III, we all know him as Bobby Taylor, Troy Vincent, Brian Dawkins, and then a weird combination of safeties. We went between Tim Hawk to Damian Moore to Blaine Bishop to where we finally in the kind of early 90s settled on a safety combination of Brian Dawkins and Michael Lewis for a while, which was a pretty good safety combination. And that's the origins I remember. They're like almost like weird golden age we had. But we weren't really living in the golden age. We found that out later, beginning in 2003 with that draft, where we really well, I think it was maybe it was 2002, 2003, somewhere in that area. But in 2003, going into 2004, we really reshaped the secondary to include Lito Sheppard, Sheldon Brown, Michael Lewis, and Brian Dawkins. And then we had that nickel corner and Al Harris. And to me, that was probably the early stages of what I think was the best secondary outside of that Buddy Ryan early 90s secondary. Now, I will admit, I thought that Lito Sheppard and Sheldon Brown may never have equated to the golden years at corner play with Bobby Taylor and Troy Vincent, but they were very close. And just the combination of having Al Harris as the nickelback along with Michael Lewis and Brian Dawkins that added Al Harris aspect, that was a very, very good secondary. The next really reshaping comes in 2008. We had this one golden year of secondary play in 2008 where we had Asante Samuel, Sheldon Brown, Quentin Michael, and Brian Dawkins. And then we had, for quite a few years, our nickelback and Husilio Hansen. I don't know if you guys remember Husilio Hansen, but he's a fairly good nickelback. And we only really had a chance to have this for one season because, unfortunately, that year, Brian Dawkins left Philadelphia during free agency. So the first crack in this great Philadelphia secondary, to me, starts in 2009 when we begin this journey of how in the world do we replace Brian Dawkins? And we went through a lot of secondary players, a lot of safeties before we really had to address it through free agency. We tried the draft and we were just horrible at picking, selecting, and developing talent there.
From the 39-yard line, bend over the middle, and the pass is...
All right. Following Brian Dawkins' departure, I'm just going to run you through a list of players. Through free agency, we tried to sign Sean Jones to replace Dawkins. That clearly failed. Through the draft, we tried Nate Allen, second rounder, Kurt Coleman, seventh rounder, Jaquan Jarrett, second rounder, and through free agency, Patrick Chung, failure. We tried to address this safety position for a long time before finally in 2014, we spent the money. We went out and we got Malcolm Jenkins. And then in 2016, we turned around and followed it up with the signing of Rodney McLeod. Rodney McLeod and Malcolm Jenkins have been the most stable we've been at safety since Quentin Michael and Brian Dawkins. It's taken us a long time to get there.
The Eagles, we have signed Malcolm Jenkins.
That video clip right there was from a independent YouTuber, so I'm going to shout him out just because he was really one of the only people I can find with the coverage of this back in 2014, but Antoine D9, ANTWAND9 was where I got that clip from. All right. So you can see, like, we went through a lot to try to resolve the secondary position. And when you look at, like I said, I named three, like, golden eras of secondaries. The late 90s, early 2000s, right, with Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor, right, and Brian Dawkins and Michael Lewis. And then I named the 2004 and 2005 reiteration of that defense with Brian Dawkins and Lito Sheppard and Sheldon Brown and Al Harris, right? And then the 2008 variation of that defense, which had Quentin Michael, Asante Samuel, Brian Dawkins, right? Sheldon Brown, like these great Josulio Hansen, these really great defenses. I thought I thought we had something again in 2011. And we all remember this, the dream team. I thought defensively we had put together this juggernaut of a secondary. Damn, was it a letdown. We had Asante Samuel and Nnamdi Asamoah. Okay. We had Kirk Coleman and Nate Allen, so younger secondary players. But at the time, everyone thought they were kind of promising. And we had drafted Jaquan Jarrett in the second round that year and brought in Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, which is hard to remember that back then, DRC was a young former first round pick. Like it looked really bright then, but we failed. That was a very bad experiment. Then it led to 2012 to where we lost Asante Samuel. We ended up having DRC, Nnamdi Asamoah, great nickel corner and Brandon Boykin for a little while, Nate Allen and Kirk Coleman. Safety position still didn't work. 2013, we bring in Patrick Chung for the safety position. Doesn't work. 2014, I thought was a very underrated secondary that we just didn't keep together. I don't think it was great by any stretch of the imagination, but it was damn sure better than what we have right now. Bradley Fletcher from St. Louis, Kerry Williams from Baltimore, Nate Allen, and Malcolm Jenkins. I thought that was a good one. 2015, I thought we tried to get too fancy. I thought we tried to get too cute. We fell in love with the Seattle cover 3, and it just didn't work with us. We had Nolan Carroll out of Miami. We had Byron Maxwell out of Seattle, and there was a lot of warning signs that Byron Maxwell was not a good signing. Walter Thurman out of Seattle with Malcolm Jenkins. Should have worked. It didn't work. 2016, I thought we put together something that was pretty decent. We ended up getting Leotis McKelvin out of Buffalo, which I thought was a good signing. It just didn't work out. And Rodney McLeod comes on from St. Louis. You know, we drafted Jalen Mills that year. We had Malcolm Jenkins back there. Like that defense, like I thought could have been something. It wasn't horrible. Not by any stretch of imagination what we're going through right now, but it was another letdown. 2017, I thought was a very good year for the Eagles. I thought we took a secondary that should have been below average and made it slightly above average. And that was the year that we had Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby, Patrick Robinson in the nickel, Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod at the safety position. We drafted Rasul Douglas. We signed Corey Graham. We signed Chris Maragos. And we brought back Jalen Watkins that year. That was a very underrated secondary in 2017. And that's where I think it's what happened to the Eagles this year, is we thought we had something in the works that would be similar to 2017, right? Look at all the moves we made, right? We had these young emerging players that were coming on. We thought, okay, this is going to be the year that Sidney Jones breaks out. We have Rasul Douglas back there. We have Avonte Maddox back there, right? We brought back Ronald Darby off that ACL because we knew we had a lot of young pieces moving. We had the same stability in their safety positions with Rodney McLeod and Malcolm Jenkins, right? And we tried to get cute with the safety play. We tried to bring back these veteran players in the safety position, right? We brought back, well, we didn't bring back, but we signed Jonathan Cyprien, which has not turned out to be a good signing. I thought he played really good in the preseason, but he just hasn't panned out. And then we also went and we tried to pluck a player out of Minnesota, and that just hasn't worked. I mean, it hasn't worked, man. I mean, the secondary from the injuries, the lack of health, right? It just, it hasn't turned into that 2017 secondary. The pieces aren't there, and that's what I want to lead into, which is, what would I do? What would I like to see the Eagles do?
Andrew Zendejo makes it official on this Wednesday. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Here to help the Eagles on defense.
So, I know there's an opportunity cost to this. We go out and spend $13 to $15 million on a cornerback, and I don't necessarily believe that we have to. I think that there are upgrades that can be made for lesser amounts of money that maybe don't have the same star power and maybe aren't quite as good, but are certainly better than what we have. But I do think an upgrade is necessary. I think this team is Super Bowl caliber. And right now, with the way our secondary is playing, we're going to get burnt in games because of this. Games that we should win, but we just don't have the secondary to hold it. My main concern is, at the same time that we have a need for a lockdown corner, we also have a need for a pass rusher, because the Malik Jackson injury, the Tim Jernigan injury, and the lack of production from some of our defensive ends. Okay, I'm really going to point out a couple of players in particular. One player hasn't got a chance really, so it's not fair to critique him. And the other player, unfortunately, just he hasn't produced. He hasn't done anything yet. Like, where are you, Josh Sweat? I mean, you got to show more than you've showed, man. But I do think that we've been very lucky to have Vinny Curry back. I think that Brandon Graham showed up last week. I'm not even going to criticize Brandon Graham. I thought Brandon Graham played well last week, and I also believe that Derek Barnett had a pretty good game last week. But I'm telling you, we're in this weird position to where defensively we know we need to make a move. And we either need someone who's going to help get us pass rush, or we need someone who can lock down. And at this point, I think we can ride the wave out of the pass rush. I really think we need that secondary coverage. And I know that means that we might not have to give something up on offense side of the ball. That could mean that in the future, we're not going to have the money to retain people like Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, right? There's definitely not going to be money if we go make a move like this at corner to retain a running back. We're going to have to ride with Miles Sanders for the next 3 or 4 years because we're going to need that contract to guide us through it. There's no way we can afford a Jordan Howard. It could possibly mean that we're going to have a tough decision to make between Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz in a year or two. There's no way we can carry $30 million at the quarterback position. We're going to need to scale down that backup position. Right now, we have a third-string quarterback we're essentially paying $3 million to. So tough decisions coming. Brandon Brooks on the offensive line. It could mean that we have to draft well and develop talent on the offensive line because we just can't make these big splashy signings on the offensive side of the line. It can also have implications on the defensive line. I get it. But I do think that window is now, and I do think that we need corners. We need a lockdown corner right now. All right, y'all, that's my thoughts on it. You know what? I'm just going to ask y'all to do a couple things for me real quick. Like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you guys think, man. Where are you guys at on this? Who do you think this could mean the end of? If we make this kind of signing, who we're not re-signing back? Who do you think should be proposed in a trade? What do you guys think? Who do you think the player is out there? Who's that player that needs to be brought into Philadelphia? The obvious being is Jalen Ramsey, but who else do you guys see out there? All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here. Video's long enough. Bye, guys.